Hey YouTubers, if you've been following my channel for the past year and a half or 2 years, you know I've been on a journey to upgrade my audio room to the next level. And that's included a lot of improvements in equipment. I've got new CD player, DAC, amplifier. I already had a nice turntable, and I tried a number of speakers before I settled on some that I really like. And I'm going to have links to all the products that I'm going to talk about in the description down below. But every time I've made this video, and I've done it several times, it keeps coming out too long. So I'm going to kind of gloss over some things, just check the links. And so listening to the speakers by ear, I decided that about 19 inches from the front wall was the best place. And since I want professional advice on my room acoustic treatment, I wanted to be able to take professional readings. And so I downloaded the Room EQ Wizard software, and I bought a calibrated microphone, and from Parts Express, actually, very inexpensive. And I started watching videos and reading up on how to take room acoustic measurements. And I became proficient enough at it to get a baseline reading for the room. And also with the subwoofers turned off, I was able to dial in the best spot for the speakers, which turned out to be 21 inches away from the wall. By ear, I thought 19 sounded pretty good, but I found some improvement to be had by moving them a few more inches further into the room. And so once I had that in here and I'd removed all my homemade acoustic treatments, I took some measurements and I sent those off to two different companies, Music City Acoustics and GIK Acoustics. And they came back with some really good recommendations. There were some similarities and some differences. And so I want to talk about what I chose and why. And also I'll gloss over very high altitude view of how to use the Room EQ Wizard. I'm not going to give you enough to be able to do it yourself. I can barely take measurements myself, and I don't want to give any bad information. I'd rather not provide enough information than to tell you something that's going to send you down the wrong path. And Room EQ Wizard is a lot like Photoshop. You know, within a few minutes you can learn the basics, but you could spend years learning all the intricacies of this software and all that it's capable of. And so I encourage you to check out some really good videos that are out there on YouTube for learning this software. And like I said, the software is free, $100 for a microphone. I do encourage you to make a donation to the REW folks. They're putting a great product out there for free. I've sent them a little bit of money, and I'd encourage you to do the same so they can continue to make this. Okay, so here's a quick look at the room. Here's the front wall. The left side. The back wall. And the right wall and entrance. And here's a look at the ceiling treatment. Okay, so here's what the room looked like probably about 2 to 3 years ago. Now here's the current setup with the newer Marantz components and the Dali speakers. All right, here's an overhead view where you can see the room dimensions. And here's the front wall with the measurements. These are the ones I included to GIK and Music City Acoustics. And here's that left side wall with all the measurements. The back wall with all the measurements, and you see my old speakers there that are going to be removed. Here's the troublesome right side wall. You'll also notice there's 3 LP shelves on that wall. And here's a measurement of the ceiling profile and the entranceway. Okay, so we've talked about the room itself and some of the challenges it poses. Now, some of you are probably thinking, why don't you just use room correction? Well, yes and no. You can use EQ adjustments to compensate for some lack of flat response from your speakers or peaks and valleys in your room, but it's not going to do anything about reflections. And so Dirac and some of these other room correction algorithms, you may find them helpful. I have set up a couple of home AV systems and used the included microphone and whatever surround sound processing is built into the receiver and achieved very good results. But I tried Dirac Live in this room, and I took very precise measurements, and I took the maximum number of measurements and let it do its thing, and every single time the result was worse than no correction. It sort of sucked the life out of the music, sucked some of the dynamic range out of the music, and it gave it an artificial processed sound, at least to my ears. I did it dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and finally just gave up on Dirac and the receiver that had that feature in it. I purchased it, and I put it through all the paces, and within a week or two I just decided this isn't for me, and I had to send it back. So room correction can help, but I don't think it's the instant solution that a lot of people think it is. The first thing you'll need is a calibrated microphone made for measuring room acoustics. This one's a Dayton Audio brand you can get from Parts Express for about $100. It's a USB microphone, so it just plugs into a USB cable here. And you'll need to mount that where the tip of the microphone, where it takes the measurements, is about where your ears would be, pointing towards the speakers. So let me get that in the mount here. Plug in the USB cable. And the other end plugs into my laptop. Okay, so I've got my microphone plugged in here. This going out of the laptop into my DAC, and it asked if I want to use that as an output device. I said yes. And now it's asking for the microphone calibration file. Now I've gone to the Parts Express page, looked up the UMM-6 microphone, scroll down to the bottom of the page. It says it takes you to the microphone calibration page. I'm on that page now. I put in my serial number, and I'm going to click here to download that file. And there it is. So I'm going to direct the Room EQ Wizard to that file. And there it is. Open, and then close that window. Okay guys, sorry to do this so primitively by pointing my camera at the screen here, but I tried doing screen recording and this SPL test at the same time, and they're just button heads fighting over the input and output devices. So this is the only workaround I know, so bear with me. All right, we've got the REW software up. Got my microphone set as input. My output is the DAC. I've got the volume on my amplifier turned way down. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Preferences. And we're going to confirm my output device is the DAC. My input device is the microphone. Okay. We're going to open up the SPL meter. And we're going to open up the generator. All right. Now then, this is going to get a little unpleasant, so I'm going to put on my headphones here, and we're going to generate a tone, and we're going to turn the volume up on the amplifier until this reaches at least 80 dB. So here goes. All right, now we're going to go to Measure. that set 20 to 20,000, minus 12 dBFS, 512K. We're going to take our measurement. Okay, so we've taken our measurement. Now, at this point, I recommend just saving the file. The folks you're going to send this to are going to know how to manipulate this and interpret it in any way they want to see the information they want to see. But after you've saved it, if you want to play around with it, you can learn a few things. Now, first of all, you almost never see a frequency response displayed this way. Usually smoothing is applied to the file to make it a little bit easier to interpret. So let's go up here and let's apply some smoothing. Now you can get carried away with this. If I go 1-to-1 smoothing, boy, doesn't that look great. But a more useful smoothing is 1/12 or 1/24. This gives you a better feel for what's going on in your room. And this is a pretty good response. We usually like to see a higher response in the bass, a lower in the treble, sort of a downward slope. Now I've got a little bit of a dip right here between 100 and about 150 hertz. And that dip has been persistent before the room acoustics and after. And I tried to add a little help from the subwoofers. Remember, this is without any subwoofers. I tried to add the subwoofers to raise this up a little bit, and I could not find any way to do that that didn't mess up other things. And I have to say, if there's going to be a couple of holes in the frequency response, that's right where I want it, because I'm very sensitive to a boomy bass, and I can't hear this tiny little dip in here and this little dip in here. My ears hear something more like this, and this is fine by me. Now, let me go back to the 1/12. Before the room acoustics, there was a lot of spikes and a lot of hash up here. The panels behind the listening position and on the ceiling, I believe, are responsible for cleaning that up. And before the bass traps in the corners and the full spectrum traps behind the speakers, there was a nasty peak at about 60 hertz. It was way up here, and so this is much, much better. I'm actually very happy with how this sounds. Like I said, I think this right here is the room, and we have not addressed that yet. And I've spent all the money I want to spend, and I'm happy with how things sound. And I don't know how you would go about, cutting out this narrow a band. So I'm not even going to pursue it. I've made big improvements in the room, and I'm good. Let me show you something here in the waterfall. Now this is the frequency response in this axis, and the time is in this front to back axis. And what I saw before were a number of red peaks up in here that are gone now. And also all across the spectrum, the time delay, the amount of echo there was in a room looked like it does over here on the bass. It came all the way to the front of the chart. So this is cleaned up significantly. And so I am very pleased with the results. So let's talk about what I've got and how I chose it. So after measuring the room and mapping it out very precisely and using REW to get a good acoustic measurement of the speaker's response in this room, I sent that information to two different companies, GIK and Music City Acoustics, and they both came back with plans, and there were a lot of similarities and a few differences. So I want to talk about that just a little bit. Now, both for sort of phase one, first thing right off the bat, they both said corner bass traps. And of course, their products differ a little bit, but they have the same principal ideas. And so they both recommended the corner bass traps. They both recommended diffuser / bass traps directly behind the speakers. Music City Acoustics recommended at least a 4-inch thick unit. GIK recommended at least a 6-inch thick panel behind the speaker. Now, after that, they kind of took a different path. GIK then recommended flush-mounted ceiling clouds, which you saw just a moment ago. And the reason they opted for the flush mount, suspending a ceiling cloud down below the ceiling can extend its lower frequency effectiveness. But in this instance, what needed to be tamed were more upper frequencies, so there was no benefit to having the ceiling cloud lower, and I've got 8-foot ceilings in here, and so their recommendation was to mount them directly to the ceilings. Now, MCA, rather than recommending ceiling clouds as the third component, they recommended broadband panels on the sidewalls to either side where you catch the first reflections off the sidewalls. And I think both approaches have their benefits and trade-offs. To me, it was more important to treat the ceiling than the sidewalls, since one sidewall is the bookcase with a lot of diffraction already. And so I like GIK's approach a little bit better. And then when it came to the panels you see behind us here, GIK wanted me to put 2 6-inch thick bass traps. And I wasn't too thrilled about that, because a 6-inch thick panel, would stick out about this far, much further than what I've got now. This is 4-inch at its greatest thickness. And I kind of didn't want that big clunky panel visually. When you walk in the room, you'd be looking at the side of an almost 7-inch panel by the time you put the slats on it. So instead of using 2 of GIK's 6-inch thick panels, I opted to use 3 of their polycylindrical wood slat diffusers, which extend nearly as much bass absorption as their 6-inch panel. And I have a larger surface area here, so I feel like it's a good compromise. I think that visually it's much more appealing, and it takes up a few inches less space in the room, so I don't have to shift my listening position further forward. Now, MCA wanted similar panels to what they recommended behind the speakers, behind the listening position. And MCA went on to recommend additional treatments, including ceiling clouds and quadratic residue diffusers front and back. It felt to me, Music City Acoustics, I think that their expertise is in sound recording, studios and what have you. And I felt like they were calling for a much more extensive absorption and diffusion package than what GIK was calling for. But the MCA products are a little cheaper, especially since I was comparing the GIK slat fusers. Now, the reason I wanted the wood slats, I think they look appealing, but I have 2 one-year-old cats. And if these things didn't have the wooden slats on it, it was just bare cloth, I think the cats would be using them as scratching posts. Music City Acoustics has panels with a diffraction plate on the front, but there are spots where the cats could reach through the holes in that plate and still get to the cloth. And so I just felt better about GIK's plan. It was a little bit more minimalistic, and I felt like their product might be just slightly more premium. And so I went that route. And the panels you see in here, I've got, of course, 3 of these polyfusers, 2 2-inch thick ceiling clouds, 2 6-inch thick bass trap diffusion panels, and 2 of their slat corner bass absorbers. The whole thing together was about $1,700. A little bit more than I wanted to spend, but I'm thrilled with the results. Check the links down below for information on both Music City Acoustics and GIK. So I went online with GIK and placed my order, and I got an order confirmation and a warning that it may take several weeks for them to produce the products and get them shipped. But they actually showed up in just about a week. And so I was very excited to get them, and they were well packaged. And they're packaged in a way that UPS can deliver them. They don't have to come by freight or something like that. I installed everything myself, which I don't recommend. These were easy enough to hang. I purchased some aluminum 6-inch French cleats. So it's just a strip of metal that you attach to the back of the panel, another strip of metal that you attach to the wall, and they sort of interlock and hold the panel in place. The units that are behind the speakers and in the corners, I set them on the floor initially, and I did some testing with the REW software with those treatment panels on the floor, and also raised them about a foot up off the floor to get them about in the middle of the wall. And I ran tests and I got the same results, whether on the floor or hung on the wall. So I took the easy way out and just set them on the floor. Now for the ceiling clouds, what you do, and it's so much easier if you have a helper. If you have a helper, then you get them to hold a mirror flat against the ceiling and move that mirror around while you're sitting in the listening position. And when you can look in that mirror and see your tweeter, that's where the panel goes. And you do the same thing for both speakers. Now what I had to do was get a small makeup mirror, and using some painter's tape, I taped it to the ceiling, and I'd sit down and look at it. That's not the right spot. Get back up on the ladder, move it somewhere else, sit down and look at it. That's not the right spot. And so it took me several hours to get all that figured out. And I used a wider version of those same aluminum French cleats to mount the ceiling clouds to the ceiling, and it worked out very well. I just mounted the portion that goes on the back of the panel. I put 2 of them, and I put 2 on the ceiling, and just raised the panel up there and slide it till it locked into place. And so the installation was time consuming and would have been so much easier with help, but you can do it by yourself. It's possible. My impressions of listening to the room before and after the acoustic treatment. One of the things I liked about the Dali speakers is they throw out a very, very wide sound stage. You don't really hear a left speaker and right speaker. You hear the whole front wall is just a wall of music, if you will, or a wall of sound. And I really love that about those speakers. With the acoustic treatment, and I think that these are primarily responsible for this, and although that big wall of sound now feels a little smaller, the left and right channel are more clearly defined, and the phantom or center channel is much more clearly defined. I still hear the same frequency response. I just think that the reflections and echo and reverberation that may have been a little excessive before is now under control. Now the room is not dead. When I had my other panels in here, the upper frequencies were just being sucked up, and the room was almost overdamped. I feel like the amount of acoustic treatment I have in here right now is just right. Everything just sounds better. The only problem that still persists is on my left wall, I've got that big floor-to-ceiling wide bookcase that's one big diffuser. On the right wall, I've got a wall and a closet door, and I hear the right speaker a little bit brighter and a little bit more pronounced than the left speaker. But I found a solution. I haven't mounted it yet, but I found something that's going to work for me. So here's that troublesome right wall. You've got the right speaker here, this wall and this closet door, and the listening position's right over here. And what I really want to do is put something on this door, but I didn't want a 2-inch thick panel that I'd have to get a custom size to keep from interfering with the handle here. And I've already tried some of that foam rubber stuff you get from Amazon, and it simply doesn't work. And I found this product online, and this is, let's see, AudioSilk, they call it. As you can see, it's a rather thin panel. It's about a 2 foot by 4 foot panel, and it's a rigid, I believe it's recycled plastic material. It's sort of like, I don't know how to describe it really, like plastic foam, if you will. And it's got a little weight to it. This probably weighs 2 to 3 pounds. But looking at the specifications on this, this does pretty good dampening down to, I want to say about 200 hertz. And since what I'm really dealing with is tweeter reflection off of this door, this is more than adequate. I haven't quite decided how to mount it yet. I may cut this panel down to size a little bit and put one panel down about this high, and then have the other panel go from here on up. They say you can mount it with command strips, or I may purchase some metal over-the-door brackets, which are meant to hang a wreath or something like that, and then simply hang the panel from that over-the-door bracket and maybe extend it down a little bit. But just leaning them against the door here, I do hear a difference. The left and right channels are much better balanced, and it takes care of that right channel being a little brighter. And so it's effective in this position. I just haven't figured out exactly how I want to mount it. I'm even thinking about taking these to a local frame shop and have them bevel all the edges at a 45-degree angle. I think that might look a little nicer. So with the addition of these, I'm done with acoustic treatment in this room, and it's performing in a way that makes me very happy. Well, if you're still watching, thanks for sticking around. I hope you found this helpful. I'm learning as I go on REW software and on room acoustics. I'm at a happy place right now, but this is a journey. I'm sure I'll continue to make improvements and learn new things. So if you have suggestions on room acoustics or REW software, please make them in the comments down below. I'd really appreciate it. And if you're curious about anything I've talked about in this video, check the description. I'm going to try to provide links to everything I've discussed and all the equipment that I'm using. So thanks again for watching, and please consider subscribing if you found this helpful. Thank you.